Hello, my name is George and I will be doing the labeling theory. What is the labeling theory? The labeling theory states that when a person is labeled as a deviant, they will engage in deviant behavior. What is deviant is established by those in power through laws. Social reaction theory and labeling theory are the same thing, just to prevent confusion later on. Others have researched labeling theory in the past, but Becker's research is the most prominent. His definition of labeling theory became the generally accepted one. In his book Outsiders, Studies in Sociology of Deviance, he goes into great detail about the labeling theory. Becker states that when a person commits a crime, they are given a label. They then accept the label as a part of themselves, and finally live up to the label, which means that they go out and do more crime. Primary deviance is the first step in the labeling theory. Primary deviance is when a person is given a label by a person of authority. For example, a police officer catching kids drinking and arresting them. The kids are now labeled criminals. Secondary deviance is when a person accepts the label they are given. Becker used the word master status, which is what we identify ourselves as. People that accept secondary deviance can no longer live like the rest of society. For example, those kids that were arrested by a police officer before think of themselves as criminals, therefore will act as criminals. The final step of deviance is when a person joins a deviant subculture, like a gang. These gang members will give moral support and justify rationale. Those who go through all the steps become outsiders. Outsiders do not conform with the norm of society, and other people treat them with disgust or lack of trust. The more powerful members of society create the standards for labels that are applied to individuals who are less socially prominent. What that means is the rich create the labels for the poor. Moral entrepreneurs are those who lead a gang and act negatively labeled. An example is Anthony Comstock, who tried to get porn negatively labeled. He pretty much tried to make it illegal. He is an example of a moral entrepreneur. And now I will go through some studies done on labeling theory. William Mingus and Carrie Bushfield did a study on sex offenders. They found that sex offenders have a hard time reintegrating society because of the labels placed on them. They fear of getting found out, so they stay reclusive. William Campbell did a study on the labeling theory. He called it Saints and Roughnecks. He studied high school kids. They were split into two groups, Saints and Roughnecks. The Saints were middle-class kids with adequate grades, and the Roughnecks were disadvantaged kids with low marks. What William Campbell found was that whenever the Saints committed crimes, they were often let go. This was most likely because of their economic standings. The Roughnecks, on the other hand, were punished harder by the police. They were often booked and charged for the crimes they did. William Campbell's research is important because it points out that poor people are more likely to receive labels. The next study was done by Thomas Sheff. He described how the mentally ill are falsely labeled as deviants. Some people are given the label mentally ill in order to explain rule-breaking behavior that otherwise cannot be explained. People who are labeled mentally ill will actually turn mentally ill. They end up mirroring the mentally ill people they see on TV. Thomas Sheff said that most people express mental illness during some point of their lives. Labels are only attached to those without power. Like all theories, the label theory comes with its own sets of problems. The first problem is that the theory is unfalsifiable. It is very hard to test. If it cannot be tested accurately, then it is not a true theory. Another major problem is its failure to explain what primary deviance is. Primary deviance is the act of receiving a label, but it doesn't explain why it offends certain people but not others. There are a few tests for label theory, but there is not enough empirical support to call it a solid theory. Here's what you need to remember. The labeling theory states that no behavior is wrong until somebody else says it is. Primary deviance is the act of being given a label by a person of authority, and secondary deviance is when a person accepts a label they are given and begins to fulfill it. And finally, moral entrepreneurs are people in power that create labels for the people without power.